Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Learning Torah Lishma. I want to talk a little bit about the Heilige Reb Shlomo Calbach. I was talking to some Hasidim, and I'm like, the Heilige Reb Shlomo, and they're like, which one? Reb Shlomo Kaliner? No, the Heilige Reb Shlomo Calbach. So, for us to have a little glimpse into this great tzaddik, Reb Shlomo, I think to really understand Reb Shlomo, I'm going to talk about one of his biggest Talmidim. And that way we could start to get a little understanding of Reb Shlomo, So, his Talmud, he has a Talmud Muvag. I'll say his name because he says this story publicly, so it won't be, it's not a private thing. His name is Rabbi Moshe Rothkoth, and he would, he says the first time he met Reb Shlomo, he met him by a concert, and one of Reb Shlomo's concerts, and he just saw Reb Shlomo and he was blown away. And he said to himself, he's a very smart person, Rav Moshe Rothkoth. So he said, you know what? Let me go to the shul. He was in San Francisco. He had a shul there for 10 years. So he said, I'm going to go to a shul. Let me, at the concert he's like this, but in shul he's different. He goes to his shul and he sees that Reb Shlomo is waiting by the door. And each person that comes in, he gives him a hug and a kiss. And he was blown away. And and he just couldn't believe it. It wasn't that the Rav is sitting in the front and, and you walk in. No, he greeted each person in. Wow, he was blown away. But Rothkoth, being a very smart guy, decided, let me finish it. He goes to his house and he sees it's wow. He and he's blown away again. And from then on he decided, that's it. This is my Rebbe. This is going to be my Rebbe. So, and he told me also that when Reb Shlomo came to Lakewood, he knew Lakewood people, there's that's where where the intensity of being against Reb Shlomo, understand, came. So he knew Reb Shlomo knew that there might be people that don't want to give him a hug, So he didn't initiate a hug. He would go like this, showing he'll give a hug and just let him know if you want. That's what he would do in Lakewood. Very interesting. So So I'm going to tell a story with Rav Moshe Rothkoth, and I'm going to tell it over to the best of my ability. I'm not him, so I don't remember all the details, but I'm going to tell it to the best of my ability. So it's at one of the concerts of his Rebbe Reb Shlomo. He's a very successful person. He was also a musician. So he would he would also be playing music, at the concerts. I think he played music basically by almost every concert of Reb Shlomo. And he would drive him around. Whatever Reb Shlomo needed, he would take care of it. So he's at one of these concerts. And there's, there's something David HaMelech with Bathsheba, that was his real zivuk, so there's a certain connection. So there was one of these women there that he just felt a connection to, something different, something special. And they got into conversation, and it comes out that this girl is, at the moment, she's not Jewish, but she really likes Judaism, and she's in the process. She wants to become a Jew, but it takes time. There's so many people that want to become Jewish. And it takes time. To get to a real Besdin, a real Jewish court to make you, about Tshuva. You go to these other courts, people don't know if it really works, because it's, these other wishy-washy courts. You don't know if they know what they're doing. But to go to a real, respectable court, that the dayanim there, the judges, really know the Torah law, and they, it's not so, so there's limited amount of those real courts, and it takes time. There's a lot of people. There's a lot to learn. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. So she tells him that soon she's going to she's going to Eretz Yisrael, and it's her biggest dream to go to Eretz Yisrael and to go to the Kivrei Avos, to go to the Imais and the Avos and the Kaisel, right? She's, this is her biggest dream, and this is, and I'm not sure where the Gerus happened, but this was also part of the Gerus. I don't know the exact details. Maybe she was Megar in Eretz Yisrael. So she goes there, and in those days, back in the day, to call cost a lot of money. It's not like today. So people wrote letters. So she is like she's going to the Kaisel and Kever Rachel, and everywhere she's going, she's writing to her future husband, like her experience of going to the Kaisel, of going to Kever Rachel, and she's just blown away. She's just blown away. And she's writing how she's feeling, and she feels so connected to the Imais and the Avos, and a little while later she completes her Gerus, and you could imagine such a special girl. He wants to marry her, but now he has to tell his parents. He's been keeping it a secret because his parents get very upset, get very upset. So, from my understanding, his parents were like Haimish. They weren't Litvish, they weren't Hasidish, they dressed Litvish, but they're, Haimish. They're strongly connected to Hasidus, but they're not dressing like Hasidim, and they're sort of going in the Litvish way, but they have like a Hasidish spark to them. That's like his parents, from what I understood. So, which we'll see soon that helped them. If it wasn't that they were connected to a Rebbe, it could have got very ugly, So he goes to his parents and he tells them about this girl that he met, and she's a Gyoras, and they flip. And every time he calls them, he can't have a normal conversation. They are so angry. They do not want him to get married to this girl. So I forgot to mention that before this, he went to Reb Shlomo, and he told him that, there's this Gyoras that I'm very interested in marrying. There was a time that she wasn't a Gyoras yet, and he spoke to Reb Shlomo, but Reb Shlomo says, do it, go for it, Before she gets Gyoras, she has to wait to be Megayer, and, he has to wait till she's Megayer to marry her, but Reb Shlomo was with him that he should marry this girl. And Reb Shlomo is his Rebbe, that's his Rebbe. That's his Rebbe. He's a Talmud Muvak of Reb Shlomo. With him every day, drives him everywhere, helps him at the concerts. He sees how Reb Shlomo acts. He was by all Reb Shlomo's. Whenever Reb Shlomo spoke, he heard, that's his Torah from, going back to Moshe Rabbeinu. That's his sinar. So his Rebbe was all in that he should get married, but his parents, he didn't know what to do. So he goes back to his Rebbe, he goes back to Reb Shlomo, and he asks him, what should I do? My parents, they're so against it. I can't even have a normal conversation with them. And when you get married, you want your parents to be happy. You want them at least not to be fighting with you, right? He didn't know what to do. He wants to get married, but he wants to, he wants that it should be done in a peaceful way, So Shlomo said, how about, his father was, I don't remember which Rebbe it was, one of the Heiliger Rebbes of the past, the recent past. And he tells him, why don't you tell your father, let's go to the Rebbe. Let's go to the Rebbe. The father respects the Rebbe, that's the difference. When it comes to Litvish, people, Reb Chaim says something, they just pick and choose what they like, and they say that they follow Reb Chaim, that Reb Chaim is they praise Reb Chaim as being the Gadol, but they don't actually do what he says. They pick and choose, Chassidus is not like that. Chassidus is the Rebbe. If the Rebbe said it, there's no picking and choosing. The Rebbe is the final word. And it's not that people do it because they're forced. It's because they respect the Rebbe. You understand? If they don't respect the Rebbe, then you find a different Rebbe, It simply works like that. So the father agrees. This he could agree to. So he goes to the Rebbe. He makes a meeting with the Rebbe. Rebbes have a lot of Hasidim, so, the bigger Hasidus they can't, not always could they meet everybody on a moment's notice. Sometimes you might have to wait a few days. But you say you need to see the Rebbe, and, depending on what it is, you say it's 5 minutes, it's a half hour, you let them know what and they, figure out when things can happen, So they go into the Rebbe, and the father, begins to speak how he met her and she was a guy, Dude, bringing out everything in CIA, the CIA, it's not what you say, but how you say it. CIA, they try hard, not to lie, because then you have to remember the lies, but it's how you say it, or if you leave out information, right? So he was very skillful, this father, and he made it seem like it's the worst thing ever, But the Rebbe's, he's a Kaddish Alien, and, he wasn't one of those, foolish Rebbes, He was a smart Rebbe. In general, Rebbes have more, they have more like street smarts, more, worldly knowledge, because they actually have a community that they're really responsible for and they have to take care of, and they deal with many things on a day-to-day basis. A Rav, people come to shul, when they move, they now go to a different shul. It isn't, a Rebbe, you move, you still come back for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Things, that's your Rebbe, So, so the Rebbe wasn't, the Rebbe was, he was a smart guy, and he knew that the father-in-law might be using some type of trickery. So he says to Moshe Rothkoth, what do you have to say? So Moshe Rothkoth, he takes out all these letters that he has from his future Rebbitzin, from his future wife. He takes out all these letters about how she's talking about how she went to the Kaisan, how she's blown away, and her experience of her soul, of her neshama, and she went to Cave Rachel, and just living in Yerushalayim, and she's just in euphoria, explaining, people that take psychedelics can't even reach such levels, of happiness. And she's just explaining it. And the Rebbe's reading these letters, and I was actually surprised that this Rebbe could read English, right? But he could read English. And he's reading it, and the Rebbe starts to cry reading the letters. And the Rebbe says, "That's your shidduch." And the father leaps at the Rebbe. It was like a table there, like a fancy, And the father leaps at the Rebbe. The Rebbe takes a step back and "Abba, I'm coming." The father wanted to attack the Rebbe. So, and Baruch Hashem, they got married. And thanks to Reb Shlomo, not only did he get married, but he found a good zivug for himself. You understand? So this is, not, people say stories about Reb Shlomo. I want to come from the view of a Talmud, of a real Talmud of Reb Shlomo. This is probably the biggest Talmud of Reb Shlomo, and I think this gives us a whole new view of Reb Shlomo. And now, we just had the yortsite of Reb Shlomo. One of the probably, Reb Shlomo, every second there's stories, but a story, of a day before Reb Shlomo is nifter. So first, I want to say that this Talmud of Moshe Rothkopf, Reb Shlomo, before he was nifter, a little time before, he decided that he wanted to end out his years in Lakewood. He wanted to go back there. You can imagine, he's very connected. That's where he is as a young boy. He learned, in BMG. He wanted to be back in Lakewood, So Moshe Rothkopf literally built a house for Reb Shlomo that they could make events. He's going to live there, so he's going to take care of everything. But then Reb Shlomo is also, he'll live there as well, and they can make events. And he was going to, they built the house in such a way that where the women would stand, that they would be able to see all the boys, they'll be able to see all the action, the whole, So, and right when they finished, Reb Shlomo was nifter. Very, very tragic. So they finished the house, and then Reb Shlomo was nifter. I don't think he ever used it even once. So now what? So going to a story that I heard this from my cousin's husband. I don't want to say his name. I don't know if he wants me to say his name, but that's who I heard it from. And the story goes as follows. That Reb Shlomo, Reb Shlomo was someone that just loved every person. He loved every Yid. He loved Goyim, but of course, a Yid is coming from his, he's a Jew, and, he has a, it was, he loved Yidden, and he went to he was at some type of, maybe it was a pizza store, but some type of restaurant. He was getting some food, and he sees a group of young Bachrim. So he his great love for every Yid, he decides, what, I'm gonna, he wants to go say hello to them, So he goes over and he says hello, and all those Bachrim, it was young Bachrim, people that are young, they don't have, they're as when a person becomes an adult, in the younger years, they're developing, and especially the system today, the developing, goes on until you're 80, So, people, they're very young, and they're, people, young people, in their nature, they're extremists. They don't balance and, understanding, in a worldly way, the world, it's something that comes later. It could come then, but, you would need people, you would need the rabbis, you need the rebbitzins to really focus on that the boys and girls, should become mature earlier. You would need them to actually, focus on that. So, it's these young people, very, Bachram, young Bachram. And, everybody knows of Shlomo back then, the whole, people was, you know, people were all, speaking against him. He came from BMG, and he also came from Lubavitch, and then he started to do Kiruv, and then, in the Kiruv, he just saw that, he just loved Yidden so much. He started to, he saw that he could, if he hugs someone, that could be the difference between them continuing on in life or taking their life. It could be the difference between someone returning back to Hashem, returning back to Judaism, or being lost forever. So he started to hug the girls as well, and many times give them a kiss on the cheek, like over there. And you could imagine this, the Rosh Yeshivas and the Rebbes, went to town with him, but he just loved Yidden so much. There was a lot of hate that people were spewing at him, but he just loved everybody, and he's just this one person that loves people so much. He sees this girl that she needs a hug, so, and he really loves her. So when he gives her a hug, it's different than when someone who's cold, a Litvak gives her, it's not the same. He really loves her, as a person. He loves her, so it means a lot. You feel that when you touch someone that really loves you, you feel that love, So, in those days, that was, Rav Shlomo was the topic, and and the young people or the frum people, they were very hostile towards him, and not all of them, but in general, that's the way it was. And he just loved every Yid unconditionally, like he just loved them. He just loved them. So Reb Shlomo, he sees these boys, and he just, he loves them so much. He just can't help himself to go over to them and say good morning, to say hello. And they, being young, they turn to him and they're like, no, they're like, we don't want to say good morning to you. We're not your friend. And they were very, very, they said, very hurtful words. And to the Reb Shlomo, who loves every Yid, and seeing that these Yidden don't want to connect to him, it really affected him. It really affected him, and he's also much older, and, things affect you more when you're older. And he's just so affected. And Reb Shlomo, he wants to love them. He wants them to love, he loves them. He wants them to love him. So he asks them, he says, why don't you love me? Right? Why don't you want to? So they told him, because you hug, and kiss girls, we're talking about over here, not, not over there, over here we're talking about. So, Reb Shlomo says, if I take upon myself, if I do tshuva and take upon myself not to hug a girl again, would you love me? And they said yes. So Reb Shlomo, right there, he said, he just got up and said, Hashem, please forgive me for hugging and kissing girls. Again, we're talking about a kiss over here, not on the lips. And from now on, I'm take upon myself not to hug and kiss girls. The next day, Reb Shlomo dies. Hashem, Hashem wanted him to die with kaparas avodas, with forgiveness. If he ever hugged someone when he wasn't supposed to, he should be forgiven. And because I'm sure of Shlomo, when he meets this girl, that a hug, from someone that really loves her would literally give her strength for her entire life, I'm sure he wouldn't be able to hold back. So Hashem took him the next day. This is Reb Shlomo, there's a lot of people there, they say they care a lot. They could cry, they could do all types of things. But is it real, Are they really real? Reb Shlomo was real. He was real. He would do anything for a yid. And he would be his greatest pleasure to help someone that's not a Jew, that's a guy. This is Reb Shlomo. There's so much we have to learn from him. All of this hate. Today, it's sort of, it's too long ago. You can't keep on the facade for too long. The person's not even alive. Like, whoa, you're screaming at a wall. So now, the yeshivish world is, Reb Shlomo is being accepted, more and more into it, and they just know he did certain things that were questionable, but, as a religious Jew, but he didn't do anything like that was evil, he just, as a Jew, it was questionable, those two things that we just said before, it's, and, people just, we don't have to focus on that. And you could focus on the good of the person, especially when the bad is not evil bad. It's bad because for a Jew you're not allowed to do that, but it's not a real evil thing. You understand? The opposite. If he was a non-Jew, that would be a holy thing he's doing. You understand? And in halacha, there is, there's big, there's big reason in halacha to say that it's also fine. He's helping out people that when he gives them a hug, now they don't commit suicide. Now they come back to Hashem. La halacha, it's not simple to say that it was usher what he did, that it was forbidden. It's very, the argument that it was permitted is greater. You just have to have pure intentions, You can't have sexual intentions. That's all. That's the issue. Now, should we do it? Absolutely not. We're not Reb Shlomo. And when they saw him doing it, people were, whoever those Rabbanim were and Rebbitzins were that spoke against, they were afraid that would spread, that people would think that that's okay. That was, their reasoning, and that's why they spoke up against it. And, but they weren't right what they did, I'll just be the one to say it, I'm the guy that just says it the way it is, They were wrong. They were wrong to say it in a way that makes the youth, that makes the people against him. You could say it in a respectful way that he's he really loves Yidden, but this is not something that, this aspect, we don't agree with. Or you could say, if you want to be really truthful, you could say, we don't know if this is allowed or not. It's a question. It's not so simple to say it's usher, and to say 100% that it's mutter. It's not either easy to say. You understand? But you could say it. Look at it as a Havas Yisrael. Learn from that. Don't learn from that. And in this way, you could have Yiddishkeit continue, instead of using all your energy to fight a person who's actually doing God's work, you understand? Instead of putting all your energy to fight him and to try to make him look like an evil person, you could have used that energy to do good. So it was wrong the way people went about it. And secondly, if you're afraid because of one person that the whole Yiddishkeit's going to fall apart, that means that you're a horrible teacher, if I had a community and someone did this, right, especially when it's not in my community, but even if it is in my community, to sit and berate him and to get everybody to be against him, and because you're afraid for Hashem, that's not called being afraid for Hashem. That's you. You understand? It's nothing to do with Hashem. If the whole Yiddishkeit could be ruined by one person, what type of Yiddishkeit is that? What low level of Yiddishkeit are you teaching them? So, I say this, first of all, because we there's a lot to learn here. That just because someone's righteous doesn't mean they won't make a mistake. And the only person you have bittul to, that you nullify yourself to, is Hashem. Hashem says, keep Shabbos. I don't understand everything. What's the point of the 39 malachos? What's the big deal? The only person you have bittul, that you nullify yourself to, is Hashem. Anybody else, if it's not Hashem, then you always, if they're a great person, of course you take their words seriously, but you always reserve the right to take a moment and think about it. Now, if it's a great person that said it to you, think about it, many times, because that person's great, you understand? But you always reserve the right to think about it. And that's the way, never a bittul to a human being. That's the beginning of Avodah Zarah. Having bittul to a human being. Only to Hashem. If you have bittul to a human being, you don't have bittul to Hashem. If you have bittul to a human being is not God. They make mistakes. And then you serve their mistakes. Their mistakes are passed on throughout your life, throughout generations. You do not serve human beings. You serve God. And the only nullification is to God. That's it. If someone wants to come up with their own ideas, that's fine. They can do that for themselves. But to push that upon you is wrong. Right? We see in the Gemara, how they're so careful, right? This rabbi thinks this is the right thing. The other rabbi thinks this is the right thing. Sometimes the Gemara comes out that this rabbi was wrong. Not just that the halakha is not like him, but he was wrong. You understand? So, the process of halacha, of a nation, you need so many rabbis, so many to be together, to check each other, to make sure that they're doing things right. You understand? You have to be so careful. It's one thing if you mess up your life, but as a rabbi, you make a mistake, you're messing up hundreds of, thousands of people's lives. All those people that follow you, you're messing their lives up, either physically or spiritually, whichever one it is. It could be both. Reb Shlomo, we have to learn from Shlomo to love every Yid, to love everybody, but especially every Yid. You have to learn to acquire good midas. Stop with we go through life with these bad midas and we never get rid of them. We have to start cleaning up ourselves, clean up our act. Get rid of the bad midas. I love you, and Hashem loves you more. May the schus of Reb Shlomo help us throughout our lives.